Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's where the conversation is these days about the Heat. $2.99 per month. If you click on the link in the description, you will bypass the Apple upcharge, and then you can cancel at any time. So you're basically making a $2.99 commitment. Pass on the Starbucks for one morning. Join the best Heat conversation anywhere. We have the most Heat. You also get our exclusive stage shows, which do not show up on the podcast feed. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Includes Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. Play across the sports spectrum. You can play anything with Jimmy Butler on there right now. So, again, put down $5. Get $50 to play right away. As we're recording this, Herro at 24 points. Looks pretty good against Utah. So, check it out. $5 down, 50 to play. PrizePicks.com. Use the code F-I-V-E. And now, today's episode.
Down the bitch gang. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust.
You sound scared.
It's about have the guts, we're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most Heat anywhere.
All right, the most important thing today is that our guy Mercy is in the studio right now. Literally, is in the studio right now as we speak, recording a new intro.
I was just gonna say you should need to record a new one for sure.
We just did a new one. We added the "you sound scared" thing, and now everyone is scared, so that actually applies. Alex is producing today. He says, "Got to find something to rhyme with Kuminga." Was I not supposed to put that on the podcast anyway? Or I don't know, something to rhyme with Van Vliet. We'll get something to come in
or
there,
Ingram.
but I was. Ingram, right? But obviously, it's not going to be Jimmy, and I don't know if the impact we trust is how everybody's feeling these days. But anyway, today's floor plan, the voice you hear for his 7,000th appearance on the podcast, Jorge Sedano. Of course, you can find him at ESPN Los Angeles and ESPN and all the other things that he does, but he's still a Miami guy at heart. We got a big week for guests. So in addition to what we're doing with the post-game shows, which I'll be on some, Greg will be on some, and we'll mix these up as we go, and the late night ones as well. Alex and Brady, you'll hear from them too. But we're also going to have guests. So we've got George today. Tomorrow, Evan Cohen. He's got the spreadsheets going. George, there's nothing Evan likes better in life. I don't even think his own children he likes better than trade machine stuff. So we're gonna have Evan on, and then we're gonna have our guy Vinny Goodwill, who obviously has been very close to the Jimmy situation. Vinny, I remember my first podcast, George, with Vinny when after he signed, or after the Heat acquired Jimmy, and he says, yeah, this will go really well for a while, but at some point, and it's kind of where we're at. And then Rohan Narkarni finally answered a DM, so he's going to be on with us on Tuesday. So starts at a guest list, but we start with George.
It's good you started off with the strongest, it's like baseball now. The best hitter hits first. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but I mean, here's a good question, actually. Bam is the last introduction now, right?
Oh, yeah, there's no question about it.
Right. I mean, he's the captain. He's the captain.
This is a mess of epic proportions. And
Yes.
honestly, Ethan,
glorious mess.
Well, if I was picking sides, I would probably side with the Heat because you and I both know there's a lot of things that have not been reported about this relationship in almost 7 years that they have put up with that no one else got to do while they were here as superstars. And I don't think that stuff matters to fans anyway, for whatever it's worth.
It matters to the support staff. I'll tell you that, George. They are breathing an enormous sigh of relief right now.
I'll just say this. I slight lean to the Heat here, but both parties completely botched this.
Okay. No, that's fair. And that's how we're going to go through this. Now, I just want to say something, though. I was traveling. I was on a trip with my daughter. All this stuff blew up. And I did get a chance to do a podcast with Greg, but it was prior to the suspension. So I just want to mention that first, and we'll start with that. And let me go over it here. This is a 7-game unpaid suspension. The NBA has, and by the way, the key wording in this was for actions over the past several weeks. Okay. So this was not just recent. My other reporting on this, well, that's not reporting, that's out there. But my reporting on this at this stage is this. And I know people are going to ask, well, Ethan, you kept tweeting that he was going to come back engaged and all this from everything after he was sick, which he was sick, by the way. So let's stop the conspiracy theories of that part. But he was going to come back engaged. And I can tell you that that's what the Heat believed.
Well, because the agent sold them that. All right, let's.
Well, no, but the agent also. Well, he claims. I know you and I have a difference of opinion on this because you don't believe anything Bernie says.
I don't believe a word he says. He has no more credibility the way he went after Shams and the way everything is completely unfolded exactly the way Shams said. He has zero credibility. I don't care if he tweets at me 6,000 times and calls me names like he tends to do, bro. You completely botch this. You lied. You thought you could control your client. You have not controlled your client. That's the reality of this. And by the way, he's not controllable because he is who he is. This has been who he's been his entire career. He is a bit of an enigma in that way. Now, I think most people, because he had the success he'd had in Miami, because the agent was vouching for him, I think that most people felt like, wow, this is probably the closest thing Jimmy had to a real home. Because the other places, I guess Chicago maybe initially, but the other place was a mercenary. And now he's become a mercenary here. And he botched this thing. Like there's no way what he did the other day helps his cause by any stretch of the imagination. So the agent to me has not done a great job. And he has not done a great job. And the team, yes, all three, as I mentioned to start this, has not done a great job because you got a KYP. You got to know your personnel. The team is also guilty, Ethan, of drinking their own Kool-Aid, right? And thinking that their thing works better than everyone else's all the time. And yes, sometimes it does work out better than everyone else. And I would even say more times than not. But that is not something that's going to happen across the board. So they are also at fault for drinking their own Kool-Aid and believing what they believed was a championship roster. I will give the agent and Jimmy that this roster is not a championship roster. And if he had any beef with it, that I understand.
All right, so let's peel back the layers one by one here, because obviously you have strong views on that. I know everybody says I've been biased on this. I'm actually trying to see both sides of it and present it as we go. Things are fluid. I can tell you right now, again, beyond the 7-game suspension, that I started to hear whispers over the past 24 hours from both sides that lead me to believe that a trade is more imminent than some are now reporting, and that I reported before. Okay, so let's just start.
You think
there.
It's more likely to happen now?
I think, well, not just more likely, but that it may more likely be soon than I thought. I do know that the Heat have got offers. Okay, nothing to their liking as of this point, at least in the way that it's being presented out there. And I do know that people around Jimmy think that this is going to happen sooner than later. We'll see. Again, my thought had been they weren't going to trade him, of course. And then after that, Pat put out a statement that we're not going to trade him. And now, ultimately, I think it's more likely that they're going to trade him than just send him home for the whole year. Okay, because we get into all kinds of other issues, especially with the NBA PA getting involved. Although I will say this, George, just one more thought on this. I do think that as much as the NBA PA has gotten involved now, and now there's a grievance, and now if all this stuff comes out, there's going to be a lot of dirty laundry on both sides, but mostly directed at Jimmy, okay, from the organization. There's going to be a lot of ugly stuff because you and I have heard whispers about a lot of things, and there's stuff we don't know, and this is all going to come out, okay, if this goes to a grievance. But I do know also, and I want to speak to you about this before we get into the specific parts of this because you cover the NBA at large, is that the NBA doesn't want this kind of thing.
No.
With a high-profile player. It's one thing for a team to send P.J. Tucker home. Nobody cares. He's 39 years old. It's another thing to send somebody who has the profile of Jimmy Butler home for the entire season.
By the way,
and the NBA wants its guys to play. I think the NBA is going to back the Heat here. Am I wrong about that?
I agree with you. And by the way, don't go too far from the Heat. Like, remember, Alonzo Mourning ended up back with the Heat because Toronto sent him home. So it certainly has been something that has actually benefited the Heat in the past.
Well, Dragic also.
Right. So there have been some instances where it's helped. But yeah, look, of course the league doesn't want this. And by the way, why would they? They have an incredible perception problem in regards to their players don't want to play. Now there's this assertion that he's dogging it, which doesn't help the cause either. If you're the league, this is a nightmare situation.
Okay, and one more thing. I know as we're going to go piece by piece here, because I want to just finish the loop on this. I know you say you don't believe anything that Bernie said. I can tell you that the Heat believed what they were told. Okay, that Jimmy was going to come back. That Jimmy was going to come back engaged. And according to Jimmy's camp's side of this, he was engaged until the first few minutes of the game against the Pelicans, where he was basically completely out of the game plan. Just let me finish on this because I know you're going to laugh at this with where your perspective is. But he was completely out of the game plan and watching basically Tyler and Duncan do stuff at the top and Bam shoot mid-range jumpers. And that's the point that Jimmy checked out. I have argued on this, and we're gonna review that on playback. I'm gonna watch the first 6 minutes because it looked more to me on first glance that Jimmy just went to the corner by himself. Okay, like I don't think Spo is in the business of sending his best player to go do nothing. But again, I'm going to review it, and we're gonna do a full fair counting of it. My view on this is that Jimmy lost the public with the attack on Spoelstra. Do you agree with that? Because our polls totally flipped when he did that. I feel like most of the public was kind of in slightly favored Jimmy against the front office, although they didn't really want the extension at the price it was at. But once he went after Spo is the sacred cow. No matter how many people criticize his rotations, I think he's the most popular person in the Heat organization, and I think that's where Jimmy lost the plot here.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would say this. He's also the guy that has vouched for every player on that team, despite their issues with the front office. Okay. And people will point out how they almost fought or whatever against Golden State a year or two ago, or whatever it was. But Spo behind the scenes, no one, vouches for these guys. Even a guy like Lowry, right? Who was at odds with the front office and the organization. Spo was the last one saying, I can make it work. You know what I mean? So, like, I again, to your point, going after Spo was probably not smart. I didn't love his tact at the podium that day. I didn't love the tact with Spo. And here's the thing: when I said that, his agent can't control his client because he's not controllable, it shouldn't be his agent's job. Okay, it should be his agent's job to console him if needed, to advise him clearly, right? But ultimately, he's a grown-ass man who makes his own decisions, okay? And his decision-making, historically, has not been great. We can also argue that the guy at the top of the food chain for the Heats has not always been great either, that he's also been led by emotion too, okay? And I don't think that's something that just should be brushed under the rug either. But I do understand if there's one thing historically that drives Pat Riley crazy, it's not playing games. Okay. If I was going to go back, because it's funny, I saw Paul Pierce made this comment on one of his shows, one of his talk shows, about how Pat Riley's ruining the culture because he's too hardcore and too old school. And he ran Shaq out of town and LeBron out of town and Wade out of town and now Jimmy. And my response to that is that each one of those things, there's nuance to that. Okay.
Yes. That's my point.
Shaq almost punched him in the face. Okay.
Yeah. Shaq refused to play.
Pat Riley's hide. Okay.
Right.
All right. And if you can Google it. You can find it. Okay. So there's that. Let's separate that. And by the way, Shaq had won a championship for this team. Okay. Not to diminish Jimmy's efforts. Okay. And success, but it's not the same level of success. Okay. So let's start with that. The LeBron thing, look, the tact he took, he made a lot of missteps. The stuff with the, it started with the stuff with the Savannah being pregnant. Like, what are you doing there? But then the way he went at him, like
go out through that first open door, right?
Yeah,
like all that stuff.
Listen, I think Heat fans loved it. He won the press conference that day.
He was gone anyway, though, George. I mean, that's the thing.
That was my point. He was never staying anyway.
Once he won the championships here, and especially with Dwayne's declining health, he wanted to go back to Cleveland. That was a foregone conclusion.
Correct.
That was right.
So when they got the number 1 overall pick again, for the second time, that's it. He knew he was.
He was gone in 2012. I just didn't realize it. And they didn't realize it at the time necessarily.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Once he had won and validated that he was a champion, he could go back and be the conquering hero. That was always going to be the case. Okay. So there's two things. All right.
I mean, making Pat and Andy go out to Vegas and sit there, play blackjack while they watch soccer was not the best way to approach it. And I'm a LeBron guy, but I'm just saying that there were missteps. But I think what Jimmy's doing now is worse. Honestly, he is worse.
Wade is the thing they regret, and they mended fences. And by the way, even Dwayne realized afterwards, like, oh yeah, we probably should have made that work. But that was absolutely on Pat. And
there was, but there was also nuance to that. The agent had a role in that too. And there were certain promises that there were a lot of things that went into that one also. Again, and you know that I was a Dwayne guy. So I'm not, see, here's the thing, George, and I just want to,
here's my point. Jimmy is none of those guys. Okay. No. Jimmy is not Dwayne Wade by any stretch of the imagination for this organization. Jimmy is not LeBron. Jimmy is not Shaq. And forget about the organizational aspect, because I think all three are far more important to this organization than what Jimmy Butler has done, despite his incredible success, okay? Because two things can be true at once. But I will tell you this. The other thing, Jimmy Butler is not beloved around the league the way those three guys were or are beloved around the league at their times when they were playing.
All of that's fair. I mean, I think, and again, this is where I come in on this, is I've sort of always been known as a player's guy, and everybody's saying I'm an organizational guy, but I just have a hard time siding with the way Jimmy's handled this. I do, and I want to backtrack a little bit here, okay, on this, because there was nuance to all these situations. So for somebody like Paul Pierce, by the way, who he ended up a Wizard and a Clipper, to comment about how the Heat deal with their stars was a little rich. But I understand the overall point, because I know that some fans buy into that. And clearly, they've had issues with guys on their departures. Okay, but so have a lot of organizations. Yes. I mean, the Bosch thing was not their fault. Like, the Bosch thing was they were trying to protect his health. I understood that. Zoe, the first time around, okay, Zoe got in his feelings about a whole bunch of, but not just the kidney, but then his departure, which you mentioned, It ended up in Toronto, but first it was Jersey, right? Yes. Like, and he was calling out the Heat, at Zoe's Summer Groove. I was there, okay, at his banquet. He was calling out the Heat after the Heat had given him a plane to go back and see his child be born, okay, and all the rest of these things. So a lot of stuff gets forgotten. It's like the thing that got published today that's circulating around the internet about how, even Bernie had said and was quoted on Starting Five, if you watch the Netflix special, about how all the Heat personnel, the front office personnel, showed up at his father's funeral, okay, unexpected. Okay, so again, this has not been, it's not one thing to say, okay, they have no respect for their players, which I think is where this is going. Pat draws hard lines on certain things. You're right, okay?
Playing. And Shaq, the Shaq thing started with him at a press conference just like this at the end of the season saying, Shaquille O'Neal, or whatever he said, something to the effect of, your best players can't be playing 40 games, like, or something like that. And it was almost the exact same. And then
Shaq went after Chris Quinn and Ricky Davis. Right. I know. And he didn't handle that well. And now they've patched things up to a certain degree.
By the way, Shaq also tried to, Shaq also, and I love Shaq. Okay. Shaq also took shots at Dwayne. You know what I mean? Like, let's not forget that.
He took a lot of shots. He took a lot of shots at a lot of people. I know. And now all of a sudden everything is in his book too. If you read Shaq Talks Back, he goes after Pat also. Okay. So all of this, again, ends up being water under the bridge. I don't think, and then we're going to go to break, and I want to just get to some rapid fire with you. I don't think this is ever going to be water under the bridge.
I agree.
I think this is the least repairable situation of all of them. I think LeBron's going to get his jersey retired. I know from talking to LeBron and things LeBron said publicly that's softened a lot. It's not the same as when I was up in Cleveland in 14-15, and I would be flying back and forth from Miami, Cleveland, and I would tell you, LeBron just pulled me aside to ask what the hell Riles said about him now, and Pat was in his feelings about it. I mean, again, there's still always going to be that, because there could have been a generational team, and I get that. They were going to beat each other's barbecues, but the reality is LeBron did what he had to do for himself. There were a lot of reasons for it, okay? Yeah. But he also, George, was a free agent. Yes. He had an opt-out, okay? And he took it. They had to give him the opt-out because it was a 6-year deal. And after 4 years, he made the decision to leave. And he had the right to go do that. I don't agree with him slow playing it the way he did and all the rest of that, which hamstrung them the next year and all of that. Okay, again, and I would say that to LeBron. I don't agree with some of the things he did at the end. But, okay, the reality is he had every right to go do that. Jimmy Butler is under fucking contract right now. Okay? He's under contract. And it appears to me, at least, that he just quit. And that's a different level. Shaq,
but this is the bigger problem. This is the bigger overall problem in the NBA. This has been the way transactions have been forced over the last several years. And I'll tell you this, I think it's coming back the other way. I think
this might be the example, George. This might be the example the NBA wants to set. I think they're going to back the team.
Yeah, I agree that this will be one of the examples. But look at what the Clippers just did. They let Paul George walk. And what they got was a ton of flexibility. And eventually, in the next couple of years, they will be able to reset their team the way they want to. And I think that teams have realized that. And I think, maybe I'm wrong about this, I think free agency will become a thing again. I think teams, there are a number of teams, in my opinion, that don't want contracts past 2026, because that summer, the offseason, there could be a litany of star-level players available in free agency.
All right. Well, we'll get into some rapid fire things here on various views on Twitter. So I want to close here with George on that. We thank Alex for producing today. He will be with us at the game and on these podcasts going forward. Do want to mention another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at Better Edge. Go to betteredge.com, use the code 5RSN. You get $20 to play right away. Social betting marketplace, legal in the state of Florida. And unlike the sports book you hear about all the time, there's no VIG. Okay, so that means you're not just giving away money to the house for nothing. Also, you can find the line that you want. They've got a lot of stuff in their marketplace, and again, you can choose it. You find someone on the other side, and away you go. So get $20 to play. The code again is the number 5RSN, $20 to play right away. All right, let me ask you this question, and you assess blame level here. Okay, we're going to do 1 to 10, so we'll do these quickly because I want to get through a few before you go. Number 1. How at fault are the Miami Heat for not surrounding Jimmy Butler with better players during his run, between 1 and 10?
I'd say like a 6 or a 7. They did try, right? Dame, we saw how that turned out. Donovan Mitchell, by the way, you reported, to which Donovan Mitchell quote tweeted, you said it wasn't true, that he didn't want to play with Jimmy. I don't know if I 100% believe the player and his response to your report, is what I would say. And I love the player. I think that is not a small thing. When I said that he's not Shaq, Wade, or LeBron, and players around the league don't love him that way, that's part of what I'm alluding to. Nonetheless, I do think his agent and I think him have a real case. They could have done a better job. They could have done what the Celtics did and done smaller deals like a Derek White or whatever. Like there are things they could have done. The Knicks did some with Anunoby, whatever. Josh Hart. There are things they could have done to augment the roster. I do believe the agent and Butler have a case there.
All right. And the one thing to add to that is he asked for Kyle Lowry. They outbid other teams. They gave the extra year to Kyle Lowry, and Kyle didn't want to be here from minute 1. I know that there were things, again, Kyle helped lead them during that one season when both him and Bam were out. There were some small pockets, but also what I've been told is Jimmy got worse behind the scenes when Kyle was there. I've been told that over and over, and I do know that an apology was made to the Heat, about going out and getting Kyle. So I think that if both parties agree the Kyle thing didn't work out, then I do think some of that responsibility does bear on Jimmy. They did try to get him, someone who was perceived to be one of the better free agents in the market. Didn't work out. Okay, so we go there. All right, number 2. Did you ever buy into the fact? And again, this goes to organization. How much at fault is the organization for thinking that this Bam, Herro, Butler trio could compete in a serious way? In other words, to keep Tyler long enough for Tyler to become this? Because it feels like they've been right on Tyler, but it just took too long. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I would agree. So that's a tough one because now he's playing at the level they would have expected him or hoped that he would have played 2 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So I think that because of that, I still think, and I said this before, I will still say that's like a 6 because I think they felt like they waited a little too long. If I'm Butler with my, for lack of a better phrase, biological clock ticking as I'm getting older, I would have wanted to have gotten something for him. But here's the thing. There wasn't a market for Tyler either. So I don't know what you do. If anything, I would blame the organization in the short term back then for believing that his market value was higher than it really was.
Okay, we won't do numbers on these next couple, but let's just get your opinion on it. Should the Heat just go full young now?
Yes. No question. Okay. Just go, not full young, but, I don't think they should be like 21, 22, but like this 25-ish range, like, 25, 26, 27, 22, 23, in that range, basically like 21 to like 27. Give me all those guys if I'm them, because I think that's how they can become what they expect to become sooner rather than later. Because I think you have the best coach in the league. I think basically him and the guy in LA, the Clippers guy, Ty Lue, to me, are the best two guys, particularly when it comes to these kind of like mishmashed rosters. As my guy Zach Lowe likes to say, the land of the misfit toys. Those two guys to me are the best at it. And I think Spo is the best at it. So I like that. I like Spo in that scenario with a team like that. And I think they can grow together and then figure out if they need to, move a piece here or there. But I think that's the best option for them because the two best people at their jobs in Miami on the Heat are Erik Spoelstra and Adam Simon. So you allow those two guys to cook.
All right. This is just yes or no. Would you have extended Jimmy for the 2 years, 113?
Yes, I would have done it well before Pat made that comment.
Okay. So you do blame them for that part. So in that case, the agent and the player were right in your view.
In my view, they would have avoided all this for sure. Like my thing was, if you weren't going to extend him, then you needed to trade him before that press conference. Like you needed to just say, go to the agent and go to Jimmy and say, hey, we're not going to pay you, but we're going to send you somewhere. We're going to try to get as good a value as we can. We're going to try to send you somewhere good. If they would have done that from the get-go, yes. My issue with the agent and Butler is the way they've handled it since. Because, by the way, Tyler Herro also got called out of that press conference.
He got called fragile. He got called fragile. He's played every game this year.
And he's thrived. Okay?
Yes.
So that's why I'm saying they didn't handle it great after the fact. Could the Heat have handled it better before the fact? Yes. That's why I think they're both to blame.
Okay.
But I'm more annoyed if I'm a basketball person, right? And I am more annoyed at this. Like if I'm another team, like why do I want this? Like this is what he's going to do to the team he took to 2 finals? Okay, that by the way also saved his reputation because his reputation was in tatters, much like theirs was in tatters. They saved each other. So if I'm another team, I'm going, do I really want to do this? Like, look at the way he treated. Like,
if I'm another coach, George, he literally just took he threw a coach under the bus. This is where I go to it, who was just almost unanimously by executives around the NBA declared the best coach in the league. We can argue with specific decisions that we can argue with specific decisions that Spo makes, and we do on 5 on the Floor. But I'm saying, I'm just wondering which coach in the league is going to look at this and say, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe there is, but like,
did you see the Athletic report today about how the Warriors, like the front office and the locker room, have said, nah, we're good. We don't need you.
Well, I know that because I know that all the stuff that was out there about how the Warriors are going to make an offer, and yet the only conversations that the Warriors have had to that direction have been to keep our players out of the media. So I don't because here's the thing: Kurt just spent the summer with Spo. So this is part of it. Like, I don't know ultimately which coach is going to feel strong enough. Like, I can see a guy like, okay, and again, we can talk about whether or not they'll actually make a trade, but I can see you, Udoka, saying, okay, I can handle Jimmy. Yes. And again, he'd be back home, so to speak. But again, I don't know if they want to break it up, but I guess the Van Vliet contract would work and he could just not exercise it.
The GM in Houston believes he's got players that can do what Jimmy can do, and they're younger and cheaper. That's what he believes. Whether you believe that or not, that's fine. But I'm telling you, that's what the GM in Houston believes.
Okay, so I'll ask you this question then, because I believe the Heat were open to offering more years at less money per. That was the indication that I got. I was told by Jimmy's side that was never actually offered to them, but that and whether he would have considered it, again, their line is that he's going to get the max, and so he wasn't going to ever take less than the max. So somebody else is going to give him the max. I'm going to give you a number here. James Harden got 2 years for $70 million. He's now 35 years old. You know my feelings about Harden, but I've got to acknowledge the guy's had a good year. Okay, yeah. He has had a very good year.
By the way, and Ty Lue told me, I had them first game. Okay, Ty Lue told me we're going to lean on James to try to be Houston James again. I know he's older and he's not, but we think he can do for us some similar things he did for them back then, and that's how we're going to empower him to play.
Well, that's what it sounds like Jimmy wanted, because if Jimmy did get upset about the change in the game plan, which again is weird to me because Jimmy said so many contradictory things, because over the course of his time, at Miami, it was, I don't care about scoring. I just want to win. I just want to set up my teammates. And now they're not running the offense for me. And again, this is why I can't really take him seriously about some of this stuff. But to get back to the Harden question.
And one more thing to that point. He also is the guy who's trying to die on the hill because he doesn't want to play regular season games. So he wants them to do what? to just kind of change the game plan every time he's willing to play. Like you can't.
But why were you willing to give him the extension then? That's the thing. I understand your point about trading him if not. But
had he just been paid, none of this would have happened. Okay. Now,
and how many games would he have played, George? I'll just ask that because that's why I was torn on this.
That's the thing. This was going to end bad no matter what.
Pretty much, right?
No matter what, it was either going to end bad for the Heat because he was not going to live up to the contract, or it was going to end bad because they weren't going to pay him, and this is where we are right now.
I know you're a Dolphin fan, and like the Dolphins made a decision to extend their guy, and I like their guy, and Tua wants to play. This isn't a Jimmy situation, and yet now it looks like they made a mistake giving him the extension when they could have just let the season play out. Of course, he wasn't going to create the kind of ruckus that Jimmy would have, and yet the Dolphins gave him the extension. The Heat didn't give the extension.
Your 3 yards per carry guys are going to start tweeting us. They did.
I know. They're all Tua guys. Well, I am too, but I mean, I've got to acknowledge it doesn't look right. If the guy can't play in the most meaningful games, I mean, then as much as I like him, I can't die on that hill. All right, but I gave you that number. 2 years for 70. What's that?
Would I have done 2 years for 70 if I were the Heat? Would I have
No. Do you think Jimmy ultimately is going to get more than Harden got?
No.
Okay. Then he majorly screwed up. If that's the case, I can tell you his people don't think that you're right. They think he's going to end up getting max.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Maybe. Listen, I have certainly been wrong a million times about contracts and all sorts of other things, including just when I wake up every day. But I don't believe that to be the case. Now, I'm talking about he could get more than 70 as a total, but I'm talking about like average per year. It might be close.
And he did hurt his earning power by doing this. Yeah,
no question about it. That's
the one thing I don't agree with his people on.
Yeah. That's again, just to reiterate, the Heat screwed this up once that press conference happened in the summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They screwed up there. And they should have just said to him, hey, we don't want to pay you. We don't love the way it's going. It's trending right now from a game standpoint. Let's just end amicably. We'll trade you where, like, as best as we can, somewhere you want to go. And we'll get what we can get. Had they just done that, that'd be fine. But since that point on, he has handled this not great. And certainly not the way that his agent portrayed it to everybody in the media, including the franchise.
Right. Okay. I mean, again, if he's uncontrollable, though, then I don't know how much of that's on the agent.
Listen, I mean, we could talk about Pat's history, but look at his history. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's a great player. But at some point or another, like, this stuff wears on people, you know, and it wears on people within the organization at multiple stops. And eventually you run out of stops where people around the league talk too much, to your point. And it's just like, all right, like you're running out of suitors, you know?
I think there's going to be an enormous exhale in that building. I'll just say that. It's the support staff. It's everything. It's just, when you have a personnel, I'm not saying that a lot of players didn't like Jimmy. They liked him. Okay, he's funny. He has an edge. You thought you could win when he was on the floor with you, and he cared.
Agreed.
But it's just he swallows up the whole room. It's just like when I would go on road trips and he was not on the trip, it was just different. It was just like the player. It was like they could breathe. And I'm not saying they have a championship roster now. They have less of one than they did when they had Jimmy, and that wasn't enough. But I'm just saying, I do feel like there's going to be a little air breathed into it. And I think the fact, again, that Tyler has kind of, and it's not Bam, okay? It's been Tyler who's kind of taken this team where you can see them feeding off his energy now. I'm just curious to see where it goes. They're very young now. So I'll close with this. What is the best possible return you think they can get for Jimmy now?
Maybe David Griffin gets involved as like a third team, and you can find like a Brandon Ingram, who's not a perfect player by any stretch of the imagination either. Like he's a very talented player. He doesn't stay healthy very often. And you know, but I think that's as best you can get. And I honestly don't think they would even keep him. I think they'd try to flip him too. So like, I don't know. I don't think you're getting this great haul. Like, and by the way, I tweeted this to Barry Jackson because I know all the Heat fans are like, oh, the Heat torpedoed their leverage, this, that. The Heat were not getting a ton for Jimmy.
No,
even before this. So
no, not even last summer, although you're saying they should have done it. But the problem with them doing it last summer, George, and I understand their perspective on this, and I know that there's always this half in, half out thing and the two builds, and we've talked about that. But if they traded him last summer with not giving an extension and didn't get great return, there would have been public uproar about it. I think it was the smart thing to do, looking back now, obviously, with the power of hindsight.
Well,
But I'm
I
just saying
texted you at the time. I said that
they got to trade him.
I said they had to trade him.
Say that.
I did. I texted you right when Pat said that thing. I'm like, why didn't they trade him? Like, this is silly. Like you're hurting your whatever leverage you may have had. However, I don't think he was going to bring back a huge haul anyway. 35 years old, and again, multiple stops of issues on the way out. Like, again, too many teams talk, man.
No, they do. And I think he has the bigger issue with that than the Heat do right now, because I know people are talking about, well, everybody leaves unhappy. And so that may affect some players going forward. But I just think handling it like this with this organization, with this coach, I keep coming back to this.
Yeah.
The throwing Spoelstra under the bus was a bridge too far. Like, you want to have a contract dispute with the front office about this stuff, okay? And, I haven't always sided with the front office about things. I mean, we go back, on this stuff all the time. But I'm saying, like, I don't understand, like, the Spoelstra part. I know he was frustrated with the way that the offense went, but you and I both know, like, Spo stuck up for Jimmy, under the most adverse circumstances, and it's just, I don't know. That's the part that rubs me the most wrong about all this, and that's the part people are going to talk about, because the respect for Spo around the league, I don't think people understand. Like, it's at a very, very high level.
It's immense. And by the way, yes, you certainly not, as I like to point out all the time when I make these appearances, you certainly don't always side with the front office, including when they won their first championship, and you wrote in like 6-inch headlines that they could never win with this group.
That's true. You always, I acknowledged that you texted me on the night that Pat made his comments and said they got to trade him now, and I acknowledged that. But okay, yeah. I've been writing about some other things.
And by the way, I won't reveal who, but a member of and one of our other arguments is Jamal Mashburn, should he have passed to Clarence Weatherspoon? And I feel like there is a high-ranking Heat executive who agrees with me, and I text you that after running into said person.
Well, that high-ranking Heat official, I think, had, when we went over the top 40, I think he had Mash still relatively high on his list. But
doesn't mean he wasn't talented. He just made the wrong decision.
Jamal made the right play. Anyway, George, we appreciate you. Thank you. I don't really appreciate you right now. Thanks to Alex for producing. More guests coming up throughout the week. We want to get as many opinions on this as possible and just make people angry. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right, man. I'll see you.
On the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.